Can't even imagine trying to count how many Space Marines I've painted over my painting career. Over a ton of years of doing commission painting, as well as a few armies here and there for myself, armies for friends, and then just painting the odd Marine every now and again. I honestly don't think it's a stretch to say I've painted thousands of Space Marines, and out of those thousands, I would say I've probably painted 99% of them with an airbrush. This goes for just about every single Space Marine project I have on the go at the moment. I have my Dredge Marines, I have my Magenta Marines, I have what I'm calling maybe is going to be eventually a Chaos Army, but I've only actually done the one model. But regardless, I did want to play a little bit more with a technique that I used in a previous video on a Deathwing Knight and see if I can translate that into a cool looking, just regular Marine without an airbrush at all. So I decided to paint a Salamander. For the majority of this model, I'm going to be using a sponge to paint the armor and then just be really lazy, quick, and dry brush a lot of the highlights for the rest of the model. My aim for this guy was to paint him in under an hour. I kind of wanted to set this challenge for myself because realistically, if I can do this, anyone can do this. I'm kind of just dabbing it with a sponge, hitting it with a dry brush and sending it. So I think it's a realistic target and a nice round number for people to aim for, to be able to paint their own Marines in a good amount of time while still keeping them interesting enough to really stand out on the tabletop. So to start this guy out, I actually base coated him with a flat brush and very thin paint. I did this in a couple of layers and sped up the drying process with a hairdryer. I just used Games Workshop's Caliban green, so just a nice base dark green. I then started mixing in Vallejo Escorpina green gradually with the Caliban and started going at him with a sponge. Now, I wanted to think about the same kind of volumetric highlights top down that you would play with an airbrush. So catching light on the top portion of the cylinders, because that's basically all Space Marines are, and trailing off into the shadows, just being less aggressive with the sponge. And of course, pulling that back closer and closer towards the highest point with every subsequent layer. So the first layer was about 50-50 Caliban and Escorpina, then I would say about 70-30, and then I went in with straight Escorpina green for the top coat. And you can see with each layer, as I'm pulling closer towards the top and creating a rough, scratchy transition, it gives a really cool effect to this armor. While I let some of this painting footage just run in the background, I did just want to quickly say, I'm sorry for not uploading a huge amount recently. I've had a lot going on personally, but I have actually still been painting, so I've got a lot of footage ready to go and being edited at the moment for videos to come. So there's a lot of content that is on the way shortly. I don't have a sponsor for this video, but I do just want to quickly shout out my Patreon, where at the moment I'm giving away a model I painted in my previous video, the sponge painted Deathwing Knight, painted in a similar fashion to this Salamander. So if you want to help support me in making these videos, I'd really appreciate you checking that out. Speaking of stuff that I'm giving away to patrons, I have a pretty big project on the way for the channel that's actually going to be for one of you guys too. So stay tuned for that. My next task was just shading in and creating a barrier between the armor panels and everything else. So for this, I opted for an oil wash. I do have a previous video on my channel that kind of explains the few ways that I use oils, but essentially I mixed umber and black from Abtalung 502, as well as some of their fast dry thinner in together. I didn't actually gloss varnish this model as I would generally with oil washes. And you can see, because of the matte surface, as I'm dabbing it in, it does bleed across the surface of the model a little bit, but that's okay. It's pretty easy to just go in with a soft sponge, or in this case, I'm using a little makeup sponge, just dampened slightly with that same fast dry thinner and cleaning up the oils after the fact. I did speed this up a little bit with a hairdryer, but Abtalung 502's oils are lower in linseed oil content, so they dry relatively quickly. I then quickly went in and blacked out all of the details with Pro Acryls Black. Now, you absolutely don't need to do this step. You can just paint the parts of the model that are actually going to be black, you know, blend it up to gray. I just simply wanted to do this to demonstrate how the armor looks because, you know, for videos, having everything else black creates nice contrast and just looks good. But you could definitely save some time by skipping this step. I went in and just with a soft makeup brush added some sketchy highlights. So I used a warm gray for this. I forget the name of the actual paint, but I wanted the grays to kind of contrast a little bit with the cold tone of the green. So that's why I chose that. One of my favorite metallic paints is Decayed Metal from Scale 75, and that was used to base coat all of the gold part. And my other is Gunmetal Grey from Vallejo's Metal Color range, which was used to base coat all of the silver bits. I then went in and washed all of the metallics with the same mixture of 111 Agrax Earthshade Nuln Oil and Vallejo Airbrush Flow Improver, and then added some scratchy highlights to both, one with Vallejo Model Air Silver, the other with Scale 75's Elven Gold. I then used the same greys just with a detail brush and added quick highlights to the ribbed Under Armour, as well as just quickly painted up some of the other details like the purity seals and weapon pouches. Quickly did the base, and this is what we're left with. For under 1 hour with no airbrush work at all, I think this is a pretty damn good looking Marine. You could go even further and slap some transfers on the shoulders and maybe do some battle damage here and there. Even pick out the highest edges of the armor with an edge highlight, but I would say this is a successful experiment. If there's any other Marine chapters you'd like to see me try this on, make sure to hit me up because I've got a lot of Marines left over from Leviathan that I haven't painted and I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to. As always, if you like the video, make sure you give it a like. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I know I've been away for a little bit. I've had a lot going on personally here and there, but I've still been painting and making content when I can, and I have big plans going forward for the rest of the year for a ton more content, so make sure you stick around for that. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.